Hello you dirty dogs and welcome back to the latest episode of One on One, the show where we two-foot the facts and leave bad footballing opinions rolling around on the deck. Earlier this week, I gave you lot 3 stellar topics to choose from and a whopping 59% of you opted for this, To Fix the Rossoneri. Not everyone shared this level of enthusiasm though, with Jay Post tweeting, "Please do one of the other two, you don't know how to fix Milan." Well, Jay, the club reported losses of €140 million in June 2019 and they're currently on their 8th coach in 5 years. I'm barely in my overdraft and I'm yet to be fired from this job. So, overqualified, if anything. Oh, it's called having an imagination, mate. Think of me as the genie and EFD as the lamp, without the rubbing. So, as of this moment, I'm assuming the role of sporting director of AC Milan. Sorry, Frederick Massara, you're done. Finito, mate. And you, at the other end of this screen, you are my most trusted advisor. We're also going to ignore the whole will he, won't he situation with Ralf Rangnick because it's no clearer at the time of writing. And believe me, I left it until the very last minute. By the time we're done here, my friend, we'll be partying like it's 2012-13, the last time Il Diavolo qualified for the Champions League. Well, we're not going to win Serie A, are we? The financial might of Juventus, who generated twice as much commercial revenue as Milan last year, and the ingenuity of Gianpiero Gasparini's Atalanta will see to that. No, I didn't mention Lazio, Inter, Roma or Napoli, because I still think those clubs are surmountable. Call me an optimist. Make no mistake about it. Leading this Milan side back to Europe's elite competition would represent a fix of epic proportions. As of the 18-19 season, 4th place in Serie A guarantees safe passage to the group stage, where each of the 32 participants will earn a cool €15 million, with a further €2.7 million in the bag for every victory. Make it to the last 16, that's another €9.5 million for your troubles. Basically, we need that extra revenue, that sweet cashola to start righting some of the wrongs at Milan in the last decade, of which there are plenty, believe you me. More on that in just a mo. However, with the club currently languishing in 7th place, 12 points behind Atalanta in 4th, it's safe to say that this season is already a write-off, even prior to lockdown. As such, we'll start our planning from the summer of 2020. So, my loyal companions, now we have our objective, we have a compelling motive and the time frame. Let's get cracking with the game plan. Before we lay the foundations for a glorious new era, we need to identify where the rot set in. After all, we don't want to make the same mistakes as previous administrations. To speed things up, I've already narrowed it down to 3 candidates, and you, as my right-hand man or woman, will help me make the final decision. The fact that this team still needs further investment, despite Milan spending an astronomical £600 million since the 13-14 season, is testament to the complete lack of joined-up thinking at this club. In that same time frame, Atalanta have managed to gatecrash the Champions League while only spending around a third of that amount. Even Juventus have posted a better net spend. Then, to round off proceedings, we'll be making our final recommendations to the board. Anyone can suggest the world-class manager and elite playing talent to fix the problem, but you and I want to tailor our solution to the reality of the situation. Effectively, we've opted to play this in world-class mode, because we like a challenge, don't we, you and I? Bit sick in the head. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. Part 1. What the hell happened? Now, this isn't a simple question with a simple answer. We could just make some vague generalisations here like every manager since Allegri has been rubbish, or Milan's transfer policy is really, really bad. And it is, but we're a little more forensic than that on EFD, aren't we? It'd be insulting to your superior footballing IQ. I have made it a little bit more digestible though, mainly for my own sanity, splitting it into 3 parts. That's right, section 1 has 3 subsections. It's like Crystal Maze. In 2019, Milan were banned for 1 year from European competition for breaching financial fair play regulations. They managed to overturn a similar verdict back in 1819, but were forced to strike a deal with UEFA this time round after posting massive losses between 2016 and 2018. Now, operating at a significant loss isn't a recent phenomena at Milan. It's become part of the culture, deep-rooted, like black mould in between bathroom tiles. Back in the club's glory days, when former Prime Minister and media mogul Silvio Berlusconi was their owner, the club would regularly outspend their means. It was just less of a problem then because there was less legislation. Between 1999 and 2003, Milan posted a net spend of €260 million, snapping up names like Rui Costa, Filippo Inzaghi, Alessandro Nesta, Andriy Shevchenko, Clarence Seedorf, and Andrea Pirlo. And despite the fact that the club enjoyed great success in this period, it is worth noting that in Berlusconi's last year at the helm, they posted losses of €74.9 million. Now the collective emphasis in football has moved towards sustainability, Milan have had to change tact, a transition they've found difficult. Even in Berlusconi's latter years, when he became more averse to spending, the club's idea of being frugal was signing several players for between 10 and 25 million euros instead of one superstar for megabucks. Yeah, the maths didn't really make sense. Now there were some hits with this approach, with former CEO Adriano Galliani snapping up Zlatan Ibrahimovic from Barcelona for a cut price 24 million euros. He also ensnared Robinho for 16 million pounds from Manchester City 2 years after they paid 38 million for his services. However, there were significantly more misses, and these relatively middling fees, coupled with some pretty punchy wages, started to add up. Just to give you an idea about the latter, in 2008, player salaries accounted for 100% of club turnover. Now that is shocking squad management at any level. I suppose to learn from some of these past failings, we should probably revisit some of the signings, just to really hammer home how directionless they really were. Now, do you remember Andrea Bertolacci's time at the club? Because I don't. He cost 20 million euros in 2015 and left 44 games later on a free. Other names such as Alessandro Matri, Luis Adriano, Gustavo Gomez and Jose Sosa cost the club £34 million combined. They made 84 appearances between them, which roughly equates to £400,000 per outing. And that's just a random selection. Now, I do have some sympathy for Milan, or at least sympathy for the people who've been tasked with turning this ship around. Broadcast deals in other leagues have spiked, they still don't own their own stadium, which means matchday revenues have stagnated, and recent attempts to secure more progressive, high-profile managers like Luciano Spalletti have also fallen short. This has forced previous administrations to operate in that aforementioned grey area, where signing a 31-year-old Lucas Biglia for £18 million on a 3-year deal is seen as a gamble worth taking. It's all a bit sad really, isn't it? Like watching your childhood bike rust in the back garden. Do you know, in 2003, Milan were 3rd on Football's Rich List. Now, they're behind West Ham. From 1990 to 2013, AC Milan finished in the top 4 on all but 4 occasions, winning the Scudetto 7 times, almost once every 3 seasons. Basically, they were Italians' poster boys for consistency. However, they let their last great generation, who served out their prime under Carlo Ancelotti, get old together. There was no handing off of the baton. In fact, the much heralded Milan lab was so successful at prolonging their careers that blooding youngsters from the Primavera simply became an afterthought. For example, when Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was coming through the academy in 2008, Filippo Inzaghi was still leading the line at 35. The Gabonese hitman eventually left in 2011 after several loan stints in France without making a single senior appearance. Even after Milan won Serie A in 2010-11 under Allegri, they dithered in the transfer market, losing all that momentum. Stefan El Shawari was the club's only signing of note in the summer of 2011-12, despite the fact that the team was still heavily reliant on the ageing spine of Abbiati, Nesta and Van Bommel. Subsequently, they finished 4 points behind a Juventus side that had finished 7th the season before. Then when Milan parted ways with Thiago Silva and Zlatan Ibrahimovic in 2012-13, succumbing to PSG's zero-laden advances, they're essentially consigning themselves to mediocrity. In the 6 campaigns that followed Allegri's sacking, the Rossoneri failed to climb higher than 5th in the league rankings, missing out on European football altogether on 3 separate occasions. Given they'd reached the Champions League final 3 times the decade before, winning it twice, this decline was almost unfathomable, and the instability off the pitch had a huge part to play in this. The club was offloaded by Silvio Berlusconi to Chinese businessman Li Yonghong for €740 million in 2017. It's safe to say that the takeover took the football community by surprise, as Li was a relative unknown outside of business circles in his home nation. And this surprise soon turned to cynicism when it became clear that he'd borrowed huge sums of money from American hedge fund Elliott Management in order to facilitate the takeover. When Lee couldn't pay back these high interest loans, he ended up defaulting on them, which effectively meant he gave control of the club to Elliott in order to forego any outstanding balance. To help make the Milanisti profitable again, Elliott turned to former Arsenal chief executive Ivan Gazidis in 2018. Since then, Gazidis has overhauled the club's transfer policy. Instead of buying experienced players whose value rapidly depreciates, they are now geared towards signing youth. Subsequently, the club has the 3rd youngest squad in Serie A, 3 years the junior of champions Juventus. In order to help execute this vision, Gazidis has brought in Jeffrey Moncada, the former head scout at Monaco, who helped identify the likes of Kylian Mbappe. Despite these pretty sensible moves, there's still a lot of people that question whether Elliott have a long-term strategy for the club, or if they just want to cut costs in the short term so they can make a quick buck and move on. The hedge fund clearly tried to combat this skepticism by hiring club legend Paolo Maldini as technical director and former player Zvonimir Boban as chief football officer. However, the latter was sacked in March owing to the club's catastrophic start to the season, and Boban has since told La Gazzetta dello Sport that club executive Ivan Gazidis had arranged to hire Ralf Rangnick in December without his knowledge. Clearly, a clash of ideologies at the club still remains. Part 2, the manager. My shortlist consisted of 3 very different managers: Maurizio Pochettino, Erik ten Hag and Arsene Wenger. And you lot, as my closest advisors, voted for option number 1 in your droves. Such as Poch's current standing in the game, many people questioned as to whether he would see Milan as a viable destination. 12 months ago, he was being linked with the likes of Manchester United and Real Madrid. Fortunately for us, they've recently committed to their managers and there's a dearth of top jobs right now. Another big advantage we have is that he gets to keep his severance package of £12.5 million should he come over to Italy to manage. If he stays in England, he has to give it back to his former employers. Not to mention we can offer him one of the most valuable commodities in football. That, my friends, is time. We know from his time in North London that he needs at least a year to implement his system. The knowledge that he'd get this could be a big factor. We know the Argentine has an identifiable but flexible philosophy, regularly using that 4-2-3-1 with a high press and attacking fullbacks. We also know that Poch likes to treat his wingers like inverted forwards, a bonus given that Milan have a surplus of them. The former Espanyol man also likes to build his sides around a deep-lying, press-resistant midfielder who can break up the play and receive the ball under pressure. This will be music to Ismail Benacer's ears, currently one of the squad's outstanding performers, who completes over 4 defensive actions per game and 3 dribbles per 90, which equates to a success rate of 83%. We also know that Pochettino needs a young team to execute his game plan. By the time he'd been sacked at Spurs, his players were physically and mentally spent after 5 grueling years, with many of them over the age of 30. Hopefully he sees Milan's age profile as a huge plus. He also has an excellent track record at proving existing talent, particularly in the fullback area, with both Danny Rose and Kieran Trippier thriving under his tutelage. This ability to nurture will be imperative given the financial restrictions put upon the club by FFP. Part 3, fixing the squad. Last season was the closest that Milan have come to qualifying for the Champions League since 2012-13, with Gattuso's men eventually missing out by a solitary point. Given that they lost fewer games than both Inter and Atalanta, you'd be forgiven for thinking they were somewhat unlucky, when really, this wasn't the case. Expected points actually had them closer to 7th place, and while this metric can feel a bit arbitrary sometimes, their underlying numbers do bear this out. Milan took 15.4 shots per 90 while conceding 12.3, ranking them 7th and 5th in the division respectively. With that in mind, we should probably be prepared to recruit someone a little more tried and tested, let's say, in the forward ranks, especially when you consider Milan are 5th for chance creation in the league, as well as 8th for shots inside the box. Well, there was already significant movement in January, with 5 players departing, including 2 of starting quality in Piontek and Suso. The net of this business was €24 million profit, which I believe we can convince the board to reinvest in the squad come the summer. There'll also be around €16.5 million of wages freed up by the time it comes to roll out our plan. You and I also have to decide whether to trigger the extension in Zlatan Ibrahimovic's contract. He's reportedly earning €3.5 million for his 6-month stint in Milan. If that equates to $7 million over the course of a season, then I think we should cut our losses. But what do you think? Let me know in the poll above. Okay, so given those working outs, I think we have around €75 million to play with. With this money, I think we should invest in a right back, a centre back and a centre forward as priority. Then if we have any remaining funds, we can dip our toe back into the market for a CDM and a cam. This is going to be tough, people, so I need you to focus. Also, keep your eyes peeled for the alternative names listed below each primary target. I want to know your full selection in the comments below come the end of the video. Right back, Youssef Attal. The 23-year-old Algerian had a stellar 18-19 campaign, with his 5 defensive actions and 4 completed dribbles per 90, sounding him out as one of the best two-way fullbacks in Europe's top 5 leagues. However, he has been out since December following knee surgery, so interest in his services has cooled somewhat. His value on Transfermarkt is £17 million, so I propose we go in with a bid in that region plus Andrea Conti, our right back, who is valued at £12 million. Given his age and profile is pretty simpatico with Gazidis' vision, who knows, maybe the board will relinquish extra funds if necessary to get this transfer over the line. Centre back, Christopher Ajer. Yes, as much as this hurts, I'd go straight to Celtic, I'd slap 15 mil on the table for 22-year-old Norwegian Christopher Ajer, they'd ask for 20, we'd say 17.5, and we'd probably deal for the 6'4" behemoth there and then. And while there's always a risk recruiting players from dominant teams in inferior leagues, I think his age mitigates this. He's also got a very desirable skill set, hence why Tottenham have been sniffing around. This season, according to the fine fellows at StatsBomb, he ranks 1st in the division for expected build-up, meaning he starts an awful lot of moves that lead to shots. This is perhaps a nod to his willingness to step out of defence and make those difficult line-breaking passes. And owing to his huge frame, he wins 74% of his headers, which would actually rank him 1st in the Milan squad at current. The Rossoneri have actually conceded 7 set-piece goals already this term, 5 more than Inter. That almost justifies this move alone. Centre forward, Memphis Depay. Now, 20-year-old Rafael Leao was a revelation for Lille last season, scoring 8 goals in 16 league starts. This season, he has just 2 goals in 21 appearances, with 11 of those coming off the bench. His shots sit at an underwhelming 2.6 per 90, and only 1.7 of those are inside the box. So while I like him and I think he's well worth keeping and developing, we need someone else to lead the line. Now, Depay was on fire at the start of this season before his cruciate injury in December, netting 9 goals in his first 12 starts. He was averaging over 3.7 shots per 90, 2.2 of which were coming from inside the box. Match that with his 1.9 key passes and 2 dribbles, and you have a player who could boost our underlying numbers in the final third significantly across the board. Given the league is cancelled and final positions have already been decided, and that he's also free to talk to other sides in around 6 to 7 months' time, Lyon will probably be willing to deal at around 35 to 40, with his actual value closer to 50. Bonus round. So now we have some of the key pieces of our puzzle potentially locked in, let's see what we can do with the rest of our money. CDM, Ibrahim Sangare. Now, the 22-year-old has been a Football Daily favourite for a while now, and for very good reason. Despite Toulouse's woeful 19-20 campaign, the Ivorians' per 90 numbers were still mightily impressive. He was clocking up 5 tackles and interceptions, 1.1 key passes, 1.2 dribbles, 3.6 long balls, and 50 completed passes, all for a team rooted to the bottom of the table. In the summer of 2019, Les Violettes set his asking price at £22 million. However, now they've been relegated to Ligue 2, teams know they're in a more financially precarious position, so will probably start bidding much lower. With Newcastle and Everton both reportedly interested, we'd do well to wrap this one up quickly. Cam, Mario Götze. Then competing for a place in the hole with Lucas Paqueta, free agent Mario Götze. Now this is a lot closer to the old Milan model than I would perhaps like. We have an injury-prone former wunderkid looking for one last payday. However, he's still only 27, and Dortmund did want to retain him, albeit on reduced terms, so his fitness appears okay. Now, the €7 million that he earns per annum would be a huge stumbling block for us, and something that Gazidis probably wouldn't sign off on. However, we can guarantee him minutes, so while he rejected Dortmund's offer of €5 million, maybe that was because he's behind Royce, Jadon Sancho, Torgan Hazard, Julian Brandt in the pecking order. We can make him the fulcrum of our forward unit. At least that's what we'll tell him. In the Milan squad, only Samu Castillejo currently betters his 18-19 return of 2.2 chances created per game. So if we keep him fit, he could really solve our problem of creating high quality chances inside the box. Hopefully with an offer of €5 million per annum with an additional €1 million in performance related bonuses and guaranteed minutes would be enough to bring him to North Italy. Part 4, conclusion. So before we wrap this up then, let's revisit our learnings. We now know the backstory behind Milan's gradual decline. As such, we know how Elliott intend to run the club and have adapted our approach to suit. We've selected Poch as our manager, who has a proven track record working in these parameters, and we've spent roughly €95 million on 5 players. This means we're about €15 million over budget, so the board will have to decide whether to invest in Sangare or whether they trust Pochettino to improve Franck Kessié. Before we call this extensive meeting to an end then, let's revisit our revamped Milan XI. I think we can call that a job well done, personally guys, and I've gone to the liberty to include huge bonuses in our contract should that team make the Champions League. Bang. That is this week's one-on-one. Let me know what you'd like to see on future episodes in the comments below. Please leave me all your recommendations, agreements, disagreements in the comments below. Let's start a wee debate. Like, subscribe, look after yourself, and I'll see you next time. For example, when Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, the Gabonese hitman, left in 2011 after several successful loan stints in France, having never made a senior. However, or whether they just want an early and profitable. Oh my god, early and profitable exit at all costs, at all sporting costs, at any. Oh my god. This bank holiday.